Hello and welcome to episode 118 of the Clean Energy Show. From the corner of Moose Street and Beaver Street in Banff, Alberta, Canada, I'm Brian Stockton.
And from the Clean Energy Show World Headquarters, 600 miles east, I'm James Whittingham. This week, I see an energy commercial on cable news that warms my cockles. Being a Canadian, my cockles haven't been this warm in years.
Planning a summer road trip? It could cost $1,000 to fuel up your Winnebago. Or come here to Banff and fuel up your EV for free. The choice is yours.
We hear from EV owners about the myths they're hearing on the streets. Turns out, 13% of people think a Mitsubishi i-MiEV is secretly running the U.S. government.
Guess who just launched the largest floating solar farm in the American Southeast? It's that notorious left-wing hippie organization known as the U.S. Army.
All that and more on this international, multi-provincial edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So yeah, this is our first time recording the podcast in different cities, I think. So far, so good.
How was your trip to Banff?
Yeah, generally good. So I drove my Tesla Model 3, so, a few charging stops along the way. The strange thing is there's more phantom braking with the car when you've got it on autopilot on the highway. It almost never used to happen to me. This is one of the complaints of the Tesla autopilot is phantom braking. Every once in a while, the car will brake for no particular reason, but it almost never happened to me. But for whatever reason, the current version of the highway software is a step backwards. So, it would be clear sailing on the highway. And every once in a while, the car would start to slow down.
It has nothing to do with you trying out the full self-driving beta, which, by the way, I had a ride in, and we'll get to that in a moment.
No, I don't think so. And I have a friend who recently bought a Tesla, and he actually just drove to Vancouver and had the same kinds of problems. So it's just the current version of the highway software, I think.
Yeah, it's sort of seeing a reflection or something. It's happened once or twice in the Prius, which just has emergency braking. A lot of cars have emergency braking, and, even if they don't have any sort of pilot assist type things. And occasionally that happens, but it's also occasionally happened when somebody's pulled in front of me. It's a scary thing. Your screen turns red and it says brake, an exclamation. And I poop myself because it's, the big beeping goes off. I'm surprised they don't have flashing red lights everywhere that just scare you into stopping.
Yeah. And it is a potential safety hazard. Somebody could run into you from behind, but
how hard is the braking, Brian?
Well, it's hard to say because I usually am able to interrupt it before it slows right down. So like as soon as it starts to slow down, you can just put your foot on the accelerator and that sort of cancels it.
Yeah.
So if I just let it go, it might come to a complete stop. I'm not really sure. But so, yeah, it's annoying. It's concerning. It's a slight safety problem. But, running into things is also a safety problem. So maybe it's okay that it's being a little extra cautious.
So you're over at the Banff International Television Festival. You're just doing your own thing, though. What have you done so far? Have you gone for a walk, looked around? You driven around?
Yeah, basically, just wandered around the town a little bit. I'm not doing too much here.
Is it busy? I've never been really in shoulder seasons, as we call it in the tourism business.
Yeah, no, it's busy. There's tons of people on the streets. Lots of UK accents. That's all I'm hearing on the streets.
Is that right?
People with English and Irish and Scottish accents all over the place.
There's usually a lot of German and Japanese people in Banff. It's a very international destination.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that, but it was
kind of funny. The locals don't like Banff. I have a plethora of relatives in Alberta, and they avoid it. If somebody in Vegas avoiding the Strip, unless they really have to go there.
Yeah, it's a very touristy place. So
congested and. My brother-in-law's brother works there. He recently bought an e-bike to get around because the traffic is so impossible. It's just you just and even the streets are just you can't even walk. The pedestrians spill onto the streets. There's just no room on the sidewalks. And it's a very beautiful town and a very beautiful place and a very beautiful national park on the border between Alberta and British Columbia. you're also getting deluged with rain. There's a rain warning there for you for 100 milliliters of rain, which is a lot.
Yeah, no, here in Alberta, there's very serious warnings about possible floods. I think everyone's being a little extra cautious because of the flooding that happened in Canada last year in BC. Yeah. So, hopefully it doesn't turn out that bad, but there's lots of precautions being taken. Talk of possible evacuations in some places in Alberta, so we got to watch for that. Apparently, Yellowstone National Park in the U.S. has had, with this similar weather system, huge flooding. Their river is up 2 meters higher than normal there.
Yeah, all access to Yellowstone is blocked off. I think there's only two main accesses, really, and a couple of other minor ones. So they're all blocked off, I saw in the news.
Yeah, and I have to keep an eye on it because we're going to head out tomorrow. We're going to stay in Kananaskis and then head a little further west.
So this is just a brief appearance at the television festival then, and then you're moving on to a vacation?
Yeah, it's 3 nights at the festival and about 3 nights of vacation on either end. We stopped in Lethbridge on the way here, and we ate at the Water Tower restaurant in Lethbridge. I found out about this place about a dozen years ago, and I've been wanting to go for a long time. I've never been able to work it out, but there's this water tower that they've turned into a restaurant, which is kind of wild. It doesn't rotate, but it's like a rotating restaurant up in the sky in the water tower. So that was fun.
So my friend Naush sent me a message. He hasn't messaged me since before the pandemic, and he says, guess who I ran into today? He said, the co-host of the Clean Energy Show, Brian.
Yeah.
And I said, what's up with that? He wouldn't tell me. So I eventually saw a post on the local Facebook group for EV owners, and he said that he was in Banff trying to charge his Tesla Model X, which he paid almost as much as I paid for my house for, basically. Yeah. Really expensive car. Took me for a ride at Costco once, and it was amazing. It was amazing. It's amazing because it doesn't look big on the outside. You get inside and it's like a minivan size, like it's huge. Anyway, he said there was a rock in the charger port and it didn't work, and there was the last one. And then he found somebody was leaving, and that person was Brian Stockton. Wow.
That was me, yeah.
Across the country, 2 of my friends running into each other. 3 of my friends, because he was with my other friend, Mike Knobloch, regular listener of the show and Hyundai Ioniq 5 owner.
Yeah, it was great to see Naush. We had a quick little chat there. But yeah, there's no superchargers in Banff. The closest is Canmore, which is not too far away, half hour away.
Yeah.
So Banff has a few kind of destination chargers. So Parks Canada has some EVs in their fleet. There was some Soul EVs as part of the Parks Canada fleet. So you go to the Banff Visitor Center, and in the parking lot at the back, there's 4 Tesla destination chargers and 4 J1772. So 8 chargers in total. And there was a Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrid minivan charging when I first got there. There's 4 Tesla chargers, but yeah, Naush was waiting for me to leave. So maybe the other one was broken too. Maybe there were 2 broken ones. I'm not sure.
Well, that's not good. He said he contacted the park. And I will point out that Tesla partnered with Parks Canada at our many beautiful national parks. Come visit them if you're from the States or around the world, that they put in these destination chargers. But they're slow, Brian. So you were basically leaving the car there and then walking around, or?
Yeah, so it's free to charge and it's free to park, but there's a 3-hour limit. I don't know how close that they check it, but what I did was I needed about 5 hours of charging, so I just sort of split it up into 2 sessions where I parked for 2.5 hours, and then I went away and I came back and parked for another 2.5 hours.
Well, this is disappointing. Your hotel doesn't have it?
No, it used to. PlugShare, according to PlugShare, the hotel used to have a single charger in the parking garage, but for some reason it's not there anymore.
Well, that sucks.
But yeah, there's 30 minutes away in Canmore. There's the Superchargers.
Any 110 available to you at the hotel?
There's apparently one plug, but I didn't bother looking for it. It's kind of a crowded underground parking garage.
So did you really need it? Because Canmore,
around.
I've actually biked from Canmore to Banff. So to prove that it's not that far.
Yeah.
It is a quick, it's like a 20-minute trip. We used to go there just to the Canadian Tire and to get things at the hardware store and grocery stores.
Yeah. But it's in the opposite direction of where we're eventually going to go. Right. So the hope is to leave with 100% or 90% on the battery.
How was the supercharging on the way?
And the supercharging was great. Maple Creek, Swift Current.
Much better in the summertime?
Yeah. The one in Calgary was a little bit busy. There's a mall in Calgary, gigantic shopping mall, Cross Iron Mills.
Oh, just north of Calgary, yeah. Had a great hot dog there once.
Is that right? No, the mall is insanely huge, and it's a LEED certified building too. Like it's an energy efficient building. Yeah, like aside from the car, I really realized on this trip how much our lives revolve around batteries. Like, the fact that, the EV charging is kind of the biggest thing. But because I'm doing this podcast on the road, like I have a huge list of devices that all need batteries charged. I've got a digital camera. I've got the recorder that goes with the camera, an audio recorder. There's my laptop, my iPad, AirPods, iPhone, and then the car. But then the most annoying one is that I brought my film camera with me as well. I sometimes take pictures on old-fashioned film, and just yesterday the batteries died in it. Like,
is it one of those weird batteries that you can't buy everywhere?
It takes 2 watch batteries. You stack 2 watch batteries in the bottom.
I hate that.
And you can actually take pictures manually without a battery, but you have to guess at the exposure. So the batteries just run the light meter. So I had to run down to Shoppers Drug Mart here in Banff and pay, $13 for a couple of watch batteries.
I bet the Banff's an expensive town.
Yeah, everything costs more than it should.
I go by ice, Brian. When I'm on vacation, I compare the price of a bag of ice from at a gas station. The further away you get from the town of Banff, the cheaper the ice gets, and it's pretty reasonable in Canmore, just so you know. Lake Louise, don't even think about it as you head west.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the price of gas later, but here in Alberta is the kind of cheapest gas in Canada, but it's still, it's getting up there, but Alberta's always got the cheapest gas. But there was also a story this week about the European Union. They have settled on USB-C as the standard charging port for mobile devices. So much like with electric cars.
As a non-Mac person, I like that. Well, how do you feel as a Mac person, though?
I think it's fine. I think USB-C is a good standard. I think
it is
I'd be
a good
okay
standard.
with that.
They have them on Macs, don't they?
Some Macs and some iPads have them, but they still use the Lightning connector for some things. So yeah, I've got this Lightning connector. I've got USB. But yeah, in Europe, it's probably a good idea. They've settled on USB-C. They're going to basically force everybody to use a common standard, so we won't need as many chargers that'll just be bought and put into landfill, much like they did with the EV standards. They settled on CCS as the standard for Europe for electric car charging. So, here in North America, a little bit more of a mixed bag as we spend our lives really revolving around all these things that need to be charged.
Yeah, I notice that when I go camping, and I have, if I'm off the grid, if I'm not plugged in, and I'm charging with a solar panel, then everybody is coming to suck the juice from my outlets. It's like the whole family's got something to bring and use up my battery. So yeah, it works well though.
Yeah, I always bring enough chargers for myself, but for some reason, no one else in the family ever brings enough chargers for themselves.
Of course not. Isn't that always the case?
They keep trying to steal my charger. It's the worst. But the last sort of travel story this is my travel tip, is Ethernet internet. I think a lot of people don't realize this, but most hotels still have an Ethernet plug for internet. So quite often the Wi-Fi is crappy in hotels, but and I didn't, the Ethernet cable I brought wasn't long enough, so I had to go to the source and buy a $35 Ethernet cable. So that's how I can speak to you over the internet without a ridiculous delay.
$35?
$35 for like a 14-foot Ethernet cable. But
they should be free. Ethernet cables should be free.
It was essential for the setup that I figured out here in the hotel room, where there was kind of only one position I could do it, where I could have the mountains in the background. You can see them slightly on my video here. That's the tree line there at the top of one of the mountains.
Yeah.
But I needed a long enough Ethernet cable. So if you're in a hotel and the Wi-Fi is terrible, which it often is, bring an Ethernet cable. And if you've got a laptop with an Ethernet, that works really well.
Well, that's kind of depressing that you had to spend all that money on an Ethernet cable just for our listeners and viewers.
Well, I care so much about the show.
Yeah, I had to buy a soldering iron at the source there at the mall once. But
is that right?
Well, it's stupid. I put in a stereo in my SUV, and I'd run a microphone so that I could do voice commands like navigate to wherever, and then it would tell me just voice-wise where to go. And I was mad that I kicked the very fragile thin wire and broke it because I didn't tuck it under the, it was tucked under, but it came undone, and in the heat of camping, it just got broken. And I spent the afternoon soldering it because the wires are so fine you can't even see them. They're like about an atom and a half thick. So yeah, there's a very thin cable to the wire. So yeah, I feel you. I've been there. I've been to Banff. I've been needing tech stuff, and I've gone to the source, and it's a busy store. It's a very busy, it's not a great electronics store otherwise, but it's a busy store, vacation land, that's for sure. So how is it traveling through the mountains with no noise and no pollution?
Yeah, well, EV road trips are the best.
Just a reminder, Brian has a Model 3 Tesla. Standard range, 400 and some kilometers. But,
as I get older, I really don't like to spend long days in the car. So first day was 6 hours of driving, and that was a little too much. I'm trying to keep it to 4 or 5 hours a day, because anything more than that's just kind of unpleasant.
You're just a lazy old man with lots of Tesla stock who doesn't have to do what other people do. You just cut it short at 5 hours. Like some sort of billionaire.
Our friend Spiro likes to do the cannonball run from Vancouver to Regina, and he does it in one shot. His record is somewhere around 16 and a half hours. You leave at the crack of dawn and make it just as it's dark in the longest days of the summer.
He can still do that at his age. He's our age now. I can understand doing that when you're 20, but
yeah. Well, here's the trick. He's insane. That's how it works.
That helps. It helps with so many things. So many things. So that's just funny that, I pictured Naush at a Supercharger, but you were just at those chargers behind the visitor center, and three of my friends are running into it. It's crazy. It's a small world.
Yeah.
It's a small world.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk again about this problem that we uncovered about EV chargers not working. That was a case there where you were. They were destination chargers, not to be confused with the fast chargers that charge your vehicle in 20 to 40 minutes, and you pay money for usually because you're getting that really fast electricity, and it costs a lot of money for that infrastructure. I wanted to point out that our local EV group, the moderator of the group, said that, the gas station here, the co-op that I've complained about, is a chain of gas stations that has chargers, but they never work. So it's like, why are you doing this? I was getting paranoid. I was thinking, gas station chargers that don't work, are they trying to kill the EV revolution, or are they truly want to help it? Well, he reached out to them, and he said that they've claimed that they have some very passionate engineers working with the manufacturers. And I think a lot of this has to do with the people who are making these damn chargers. They're making crappy chargers that need a lot of maintenance. They shouldn't need that much maintenance. I mean, what are you doing? You're charging something. It's not like it should break all the time, or the payment system shouldn't work, but this is the problems that we have.
Yeah, and they've been around for a few years. You'd think they would have this stuff sorted by now.
And by the way, Brian, I hate to say this, you pay a great deal of money for a lightning fast connection with fiber optics at your home. The delay is shorter at your hotel with your $35 Ethernet cable. The good news is it was well spent. The money was well spent. You'll just have to remember to bring it from now on wherever you go. Anyway, he said that they claim that they have some passionate engineers that care about this, and they're working on it behind the scenes to get them working more reliably with consistent power. But the issues that have been reported through PlugShare and the 1-800 number have not fallen upon deaf ears, they say. So yeah, PlugShare is that app that you use, and you can report the charger working or not working. It's kind of like a communal thing, and all EV drivers use it on the road. You even use it with Tesla chargers, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it still works with Tesla chargers. So yeah, and so it's important, EV listeners, that if you do encounter a bad charger, open your app, your PlugShare app, and report it. because the co-op and the other companies, they actually look at the PlugShare app. They look to see if their chargers are working. You think they would know because they do communicate for Interact transactions and Visa transactions and things like that. You'd think they would have a connection to head office and they'd be able to know. But it's important. And also call the 1-800 number that are on all these charges and report it as well. Sometimes they can reboot it and do things to help you get it going. A lot of the times it's the payment method, and that's a real. I'd really love to see something standardized. I'd really love to see some sort of protocol, and I think we've reported on this before when there was a story in the news about it, that somebody was working on such a protocol. But basically, Tesla reads your VIN number on your computer and doesn't have to do anything. You just plug it in at a supercharger, not at a destination charger, at a supercharger, and then it bills your account, right? It's easy peasy.
No, it's totally seamless. It works. And I was going to mention too, so there's a Tesla supercharger in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan. It's at the co-op station, and there were co-op chargers there, non-Tesla chargers as well. And a Mustang Mach-E was charging. That's the first time I've seen anyone even charging at one of these co-op stations.
Yeah, I haven't either.
But it seemed to work okay. He'd had to spend a little bit of time getting it started, but it wasn't too bad. It got started. And then I could kind of walk by the machine because it's got a display. The Teslas don't have a display, so you can't sort of snoop on anyone else's charging. But I was able to see he was charging at about 47 kilowatts. And in the time that I was there, he went from like 31% to 72%. And in the same time, I went from, 30% to close to 100%.
Wow.
So he was still there when I left.
So that's not great. The Mach-Es are supposed to charge faster than that. That's even lower than the Bolt, which is...
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a 50 kilowatt maximum on those chargers. I'm not sure, but...
Yeah, it is a 50 kilowatt maximum. That's another thing that should be regulated, is that the chargers, the superchargers, the fast chargers, as they're ubiquitously called, should charge at least 150. Or more. 50 is not good enough. 50 is a cop-out because you're not even going to use those stations if there's competition. Even, even if I drove a Bolt that could charge ostensibly at 53 kilowatts, I would, or 55, I would take that 5 and go to the guy next door, right? I'm not going to, I'm going to get everything I can. So this is, the one time when the Hyundai Ioniq 5 came out, before there was any on the street, somebody saw one getting towed from one of those co-op chargers in the South End. So that's interesting. Brian, the big news of the week is I had the pleasure of going for a drive in your Tesla, which has, at great expense to you, full self-driving beta software. And you've recently received it along with about 100,000 other people. And I got to see what it was like in summer driving in our small city in Canada. I believe, and I'm not sure here, but I believe, well, we made a YouTube video. So go to our YouTube channel, Clean Energy Show on YouTube, and you can watch the whole thing, which is about 20 minutes long. We navigated to a 7-Eleven, or you can watch an edited version of just the low lights. I call them low lights because they're incidents and concerns, and you know how anxious I am. I got excited a few times, but here's a clip. We have construction ahead. The road is closed. How will it deal with this since we have a road closed ahead?
Well, I guess we'll find out.
Now it thinks this. It's really aggressive, Brian. There's a road closed sign.
This is like a Looney Tunes show here.
Is it still driving?
Yeah, it's still driving.
God help me. Okay, road closed. Road closed. It is something to sit in a car, and I imagine it's more so for you because I constantly kept thinking you were driving, but you weren't, because you have to keep your hands around the wheel, right? So I don't know exactly what you're doing. So my brain is telling me, Brian's doing this, Brian's doing this. But if you were behind the wheel doing it, the car is driving itself. That's a scary proposition right there.
Yeah, and we had several disengagements, but I think, I would say the car drove itself, 90% of the time on that trip. I would disengage and kind of reset us and get us going again. I almost pulled a clip from our movie that we made, The Sabbatical, because it reminded me of that scene where you're driving with Laura in the car and she's trying to antagonize you. So she intentionally runs a red light. It was, almost like the clip that you just played right there of what actually happened. And that was a construction site. And you can see it in the YouTube video where it was like definitely like those giant road closed signs that you see in a movie.
Brian. They were big. It was like a wall of construction signs saying, "Do not enter."
Yeah. It's like the kind of signs where the Dukes of Hazzard would like drive through it and, off take a little jump.
The problem was there was a little opening in the middle, and the Tesla said, "Hey, I see the construction signs, but there's that opening because they're putting equipment through there," and it was all gravel and God knows what kind of a hole to China underneath there. I don't know, but. Well,
so technically it wouldn't have hit anything and it could have gone through.
The construction workers would have not been happy though.
But here's my question. And like we sort of talked about this last week about there could be an infinite number of edge cases. Like, this is a thing that can maybe never be solved because there's just too many weird things that can happen on the road. But can't you put in a kind of a mode where if the car doesn't understand what's going on, it would still kind of creep forward and just not hit anything. It's sort of like almost like a safe mode, like a creep mode, where it may not understand everything in the surroundings, but it could still get somewhere and not hit anything or not hit any person or any other car or obstacle.
In one case, it was by the way, it started to rain and we couldn't engage it. It just, as soon as we took off, it started to rain, but the rain passed quickly and then you were able to engage it after a couple of minutes on the side of the road. And then it was a dark, gloomy day. We saw a cyclist off on the side. He was dressed completely in gray, black, hard to see, barely visible. The car pulled into his lane behind him, and I got scared thinking it was accelerating. But then it saw him and got back in the other lane, and that was fine. We turned onto another street, and you know how the road widens with the line as you want to start a left turning lane? Well, somebody had crossed that early and completely screwed up the Tesla. By doing that, because it seems to me it likes to follow cars. It's using what other people do, because if somebody else is driving in the middle of two lanes at a turning lane instead of where they should be, and then the road lines were a problem too. There wasn't very good road lines in Regina. We have winters here and they get erased in the winter for various reasons. So, but I have to say I'm disappointed in it, and it's impressive on one level, but we're not where we should be in 2022. Halfway, we're not where we should be.
And certainly you can go to YouTube and you can see like a very similar drive to what we did happen without any interventions. But then you look at another one and there's several interventions.
It's just like so many things.
Even more than that.
There's just so many millions of different scenarios that can happen that if it is not self-aware and human and able to read bedtime stories to your children and raise them for you, then it's not going to be good enough to drive. So I don't have a lot of confidence in Tesla right now, because you can go to YouTube and immediately afterwards I went and saw people driving in a Waymo a year ago. And the Waymo's doing the same thing we are, and there's nobody in it. There's no driver. So they had to rely on it. Yes, there's detailed mapping, and yes, they've gone over this one geographic area over and over and over again and ironed out every possible problem. But if you were not there, I would be dead several times over. And, a few other people would be too. So if you measure it that way, it feels like it's a long way behind what the others. I mean, the theory is that Tesla will learn and use its visual, way of traveling using cameras and interpreting what it sees like a human would and labeling things, that it's going to become just really smart and be able to work almost anywhere, country by country. Like the United States will just one day just suddenly be covered and they can open up a business and cover the landscape. The big race is the robotaxi race, because whoever gets there first with the software, and it is software, it's like Microsoft being the main computer software with one other competitor. That's how people feel that, the robotaxi race is going to be, because everyone's going to use it, even us when we're old, for sure. I know you like driving now, but
and Tesla are the only ones using a pure AI type of system, a pure vision, pure computer learning. And I don't know, time will tell, I guess. But yeah, it certainly was disappointing. But it's also new to our Canadian streets in general and our city particularly. So it's got a lot to learn about the weird quirks of our particular city.
It'd be interesting, at the end of summer, maybe to try it out the same route after a few updates, because you get over-the-air updates in your driveway and it updates the software. It learns from your interventions and updates itself and trains itself. So it'd be interesting to see how it does the same drive. And also it could have been partially because of the rain, although, these things got to work in the rain too. It's not like the Waymo things stop working in the rain in San Francisco and Phoenix. So that's my impression. And like I said, go to YouTube if you want to see more on that. I wanted to talk about a few things that have updates to some of the previous stories we watched. And, I saw a commercial. So I tried to watch less news, right? We've both been talking about that. It's not a good time for news junkies.
It's irritating and stressful.
You got to take some time off. And, but I've been watching baseball, and I used to watch baseball as a young man and kind of get into a fan. And it was just a relaxing summertime. I wasn't doing anything. It just kind of killed the time. There was no internet back then, Brian. No competition. And now I got into it again just because it makes me feel normal. It's soothing to me because there's a crowd there. It's summer. People are playing this slow game. It's just relaxing. Find it relaxing. It's stress-free. And it erases the pandemic slowly. It squeezes that pandemic pus out of my body as I watch a baseball game, especially when the Blue Jays are winning. Go Toronto. Anyway, I occasionally watch cable news if I'm eating, having breakfast by myself or lunch by myself, turn it on. And I'm used to seeing greenwashing commercials from the oil industry saying horrible, disgusting things. And I just throw things at the TV and get mad. And I thought I was seeing another one, but this one was for the Canadian Renewable Association. So they're publishing, promoting energy, but the right kind of energy. And I'm going to play a clip from that commercial, if you don't mind. This is the Renewable Association of Canada. Well, they have a website.
Canada is on a transformative journey to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Wind and solar energy, supported by energy storage, will power much of this journey. Wind and solar are the lowest cost sources of new decarbonized electricity. We now need to increase our wind and solar capacity tenfold. We need to act now, and we need to act together. Visit the CanRio website for more information on powering Canada's journey to net zero.
I feel like they've been listening to the show,
Yeah, it's so you heard it and you immediately were suspicious that it was something evil, but
you're not paying attention to the commercials that much. You're chewing on your toast and drinking your coffee or whatever. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute. They just said solar is good. Wind is good. Not part of a minor miss, but what jumped out at me, aside from saying and showing images of battery storage to go along with wind and solar, which is sort of our mantra on the show here, they said that we need 10 times as much by 2050 to get to zero. If they said 100 times, I wouldn't have batted an eye. Because I feel like we haven't got any. I feel like we're at the very tip of a very large iceberg that has to come yet.
If it's only 10 times, that's not bad. Yeah, that's sure 10 times. That's easy.
Yeah, and that's nothing. We could do that tomorrow. Hell, where we live, we're going to probably have 2 times what we had, 2 years ago in a couple of years. So, and it's not a good thing. It's we're behind here. But anyway, Brian, last week I was huffing about running into somebody at the first time I left the house during the pandemic in a long, long time, went to a hardware store to get a washer for my hose. What do I hear somebody going on about EVs costing way more than gas, even now, to fill up, which of course is utter baloney. Like there's no way you can find a truth in that. And no matter how you look at it, there's absolutely impossible unless you
My charging here in Banff was free.
Right. That's not expensive. That's not expensive.
It's not.
And inflation doesn't affect free. So I posted a little video of us talking about that to our local EV group and asked them, what is your experience about EV myths? And I have a few responses because I'd like to talk about this. One of our jobs on the show here is to get rid of these myths and to educate people whenever we can. And I think that this guy, Joe Barton, says, my wife was just telling me that her coworker was telling her that she has 4 Teslas on her street, and every morning her house lights flicker because that's when all the Teslas are on charge. She was saying other things as well. That's hilarious, and that is a common myth, at least around our parts, isn't it?
Yeah. Or the idea that, if we're all going to put in a home charger, it's going to bring down the grid or there isn't enough capacity. But a home charger uses about the same amount of electricity as an electric clothes dryer. So, that's not a problem.
Nobody's freaking out. Oh, don't all do your clothes at 6 o'clock tonight, along with your ovens, or we're going to have blackouts. Nobody's saying that. And I thought about that, Brian, and I think that they must think that EVs take some sort of great power source. People say, well, how much is my power bill going to go up? With me, and on average in Canada, and it depends on how much driving you do, but on average, it's like $30. And my power bill is $100. So that's a third of my power bill. And I think that some people think it's way more than that. They must, because it is just a clothes dryer. And it's not even going for that long. If you charge every day, chances are you're charging for 90 minutes if you do an average amount of driving. Maybe you charge for 3 hours, and maybe you're going to do that overnight, but you're not even charging in the morning. When you charge your car, you're usually doing it overnight anyway. So she wouldn't even be awake when most of the charging happens. So it's there's no truth to that whatsoever, other than that person is stupid and possibly insane, which is happens a lot. Devin Fry wrote that we have had it drilled into our brains that electricity is expensive. And it's not, though. It's really cheap, actually, most places. As far as energy goes, electricity is really cheap. So we have it drilled in our brains that electricity is expensive, and that is why we use natural gas. It's expensive to heat a house in Canada with a resistive heater. Just a heater that glows red, because that's the exception. Yeah, like 1,000-watt heater uses a lot of juice, and in a lot of places in Canada, heating your home with electricity is crazy expensive. So none of these people, and this is true, I agree with them, wants to do the math or the Google research for EV charging. They just want to read what they read on Facebook, and a lot of people carry these beliefs already. So Matthew Pointer, who has been on the show before, says, unfortunately, there are many myths. Long tail pipe pollution theory, in other words, that, EVs use more pollution than gas cars. Batteries go straight to the landfill after the warranty, which is probably
Not
like
true.
3 years, people think. They last the lifetime of the car, if you're new to the show, if the car makes it to warranty at all. Electricity rates will be 10 times when mass adoption happens. That because we have to make electricity for everybody. I have to think, Brian, that some of these myths come from big oil, that these are propagated by these bastards.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is very much intentional.
Yeah. And people are so ready to believe it. They think there's going to be rolling blackouts because of EVs. And it'll be the end of humanity, which is BS. The EVs will actually prevent rolling blackouts because in some cases they'll be backing up the grid to prevent those blackouts from happening. When there's a surge in power, they'll be able to make it even out the grid.
More options.
And something Pizzagate QAnon, he says, is one of his tick points here. And only EVs start on fire. There's never been a gas fire. I've seen gas fires. I see one a year. I've never seen an EV on fire.
It's about gas cars burn at about 10 times the rate of EVs.
Even though there's not very many EVs per capita of car, they burn a lot more. Why? Because it turns out, Brian, gas cars have gas in them. And gas is flammable, something I've been taught way back as a child. They think EVs are slow. I ran into this myself at the hardware store talking to the guy. He thought I told him the horsepower of the F-150 being 533 horsepower, and he just turned white. EVs don't work in the winter. That's another theory. That is not true. There's aspects to them that don't work as well in the fact they charge slower if you are on the highway. Their range is less. Usually it doesn't affect you because if you're driving in the city and you don't have a huge commute, it doesn't matter. If you have a huge commute, get a bigger battery. Problem solved. EVs run on Trudeau farts. That is the Prime Minister of Canada, who is not liked by many. Don't understand EVs. Don't understand EVs. So
And one that I heard was that dogs are getting killed by EVs because they can't hear them coming.
Okay, I'm actually speechless. That's the first time I've heard that right here live on the show.
It's not true. They are quieter, but they still have tires and they still make noise of some kind.
We're going to get to this in a second. There's this Canadian National Institute for the Blind wants all EVs to have artificial noise. Well, they all do because, I mean, almost all of them do, because California and other jurisdictions insist on it. So then that makes all the United States have to have them. And then whatever the states have, Canada has them. And I don't know what it's like in Europe, but in Canada, it's not the issue is different though. It's they want the blind people to know if things are accelerated. They want cues from the noise that EV makes. We'll get to that in a second. Dogs, as you know, Brian, you're no dummy. Dogs have very good hearing.
Excellent hearing.
They don't need the stupid spaceship sounds that EVs are forced to make. They would hear the crinkling of the tires.
Yeah.
They don't need to hear a loud engine in order to know there's a car coming. They're not a deaf old man. You know, there's two different situations. Dogs are getting killed. Wow. What oil company PR piece of garbage sat in an office and came up with that? And then it spread it around because, you know, everybody loves dogs. We don't want them killed by EVs. Good God. Dogs are going to be saved by EVs. There, I said it because they won't have to breathe pollution. You know how many dogs die per year by pollution? I don't, but it's more than one. I don't know. Okay. So we talked about Hertz buying a bunch of like 100,000 Model 3s eventually, Tesla Model 3s electric cars, while they're expanding to Canada. And just now they've shown up on the website, some people have found, and according to one of their readers on Green Car Reports, they found that Hertz is charging $214 per day for the Model 3 and $568 for a weekend. This is in Toronto. It varies by market. However, that sounds like a lot, but it's comparable to what they charge for, get this, the VW Jetta, the Toyota Corolla, which is your generic ketchup of cars. I mean, it's a nice car, but it's nothing fancy or expensive. The Hyundai Sonata and the Toyota RAV4. Which all rent for roughly the same amount, which I find remarkable. I think it's because the Corolla uses less gas, maybe, and they're more designed. Anyway, the Model 3s are all sold out. It was difficult to get information. But if that's true, if they rent for the same as a gas car, why in living hell would anyone would rent a non-Tesla if you had the option? Because gas is ridiculously expensive. Ridiculous.
Well, those rental figures seem high to me, so I don't know. We'll have to look into that.
Brian, there's a shortage of rental cars this year. It's like everything else, man. This planet cannot have a pandemic and recover from it smoothly, can we? Even rental cars are because there's a big demand. People are going back out and they're maybe reduced their fleets a little bit.
Right. Yeah, no, they were super cheap in the early days of the pandemic. You could rent a car dirt cheap. But yeah, they probably, like everybody else, cut back on their orders, cut back on their fleet. And now when things are coming back, the supply chain can't keep
that is the prices for Toronto, and Vancouver, I think, was a little less, but fairly similar. So gas prices are off the charts.
Yeah, so this sort of continues along the same kinds of lines here. So the National Post here in Canada published a story recently about the current gas prices and how much it costs to fuel up different cars in Canada. And this is all in Canadian dollars, but if you just subtract about 20% and you'll end up with the US dollars. And then since gas is a little bit cheaper in the US, maybe, deduct another 10 or 20% for that. But in general here, so Vancouver has the most expensive gas in Canada. So to gas up a Honda Civic in Vancouver right now costs $109.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because it's over $2 a liter. This is crazy. That's about double what it was in April 2020.
Wow.
At $45.
It's more than double.
This is, more than doubled in the last couple of years, which is kind of crazy. And there's other sort of models listed. Ford F-150, $202 to fill up. But this is the one that really got me, and they list this for each location as a Winnebago Vista, which is a large RV.
Yeah.
And it will now cost you in Vancouver $846 to gas up your Winnebago Vista.
Wow. I had my relatives that I was talking about in Calgary, they had a friend or a relative that bought one of those buses that you use as very expensive buses that you use as an RV. And before this, it was $100 an hour to drive. An hour.
Right.
Now, it would be thousands of dollars a day. Thousands of dollars to make your trip. It's nuts.
It's nuts. And so here are the prices for San Francisco. So this is the U.S. like San Francisco gas prices, but in Canadian dollars. So the Honda Civic, $102 Canadian. So subtract 20% or so. Ford F-150 in San Francisco, $190. And the Winnebago Vista in San Francisco, $797. So still quite expensive. A little bit less when you convert to U.S. dollars.
In Europe, it's even more expensive, isn't it?
Yeah. So the champion here, though, really for high gas prices is Norway. And we talk about Norway a lot because they're on the leading edge of the EV transition. They've done a lot of policy to nudge their transportation sector away from gas and over to EVs. So, and the ironic thing is that Norway is quite a large producer of oil. They're one of the world's largest producers of oil. They make tons of oil, but they're, trying to use that blood money to get themselves off of oil in the meantime. But anyway, so the Honda Civic to fill up in Oslo, Norway is $169 in Canadian dollars.
That's
the Ford F-150 would be $313. And the Winnebago Vista to fill up with a full tank in Oslo, Norway, $1,311.
See, what gets me about Europe is the fact that a Honda Civic costs $169
to fill up a Honda Civic. Yep.
That's about as, it's no Prius, but it's almost as cheap as it gets. It would be over $100 for a Prius. It'd be probably $130 for a Prius, $120 for a Prius. That's unbelievable.
No, and generally the cars themselves cost a lot more because the huge taxes on cars in Europe. So, they're generally paying way more, 30% more, 40% more for a Honda Civic to buy it than we would here in Canada.
All right, Brian, I want to quickly touch on this story about blind Canadians saying that they need new rules to put sound on EVs that don't go far enough, the rules. So some blind Canadians say that Transport Canada's proposed requirement to electric vehicles emit pedestrian warning noise is a good start, and they would anyway, because like I said, we get our cars from the States regulations. But unlike the US and Europe, Canada doesn't require them. We just kind of go by what, the Americans are doing anyway to generate a noise. Mine sounds like a spaceship. What does a Tesla sound like?
Well, there's a backup sound that's sort of like a spaceship. But as far as I know, there's no forward sound when it goes forward. No, I don't think so.
Really? Well, people in the Nissan Leafs were disconnecting it. There was, it engages at like 3 kilometers an hour up to 20 kilometers an hour. So that's like 14 miles an hour or something like that. So, and then after that, you can hear it anyway because of tire noise and, So in April 2021, Transport Canada proposed a requirement that all hybrid and electrics have the sound emitters while traveling at low speeds. And it's going to take effect in 2023. But so what the Blind Association here is saying, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, is that combustion engines, you can hear the car go, whether it's stopped moving slowly or accelerating, but you don't understand that it's accelerating. So they want to change it so that you can tell if it's accelerating by varying that sound. And I think that's an interesting idea. However, dogs are going to hear it anyway. Even blind dogs, they'll be able to hear everything. Dogs are not getting killed by EVs. And you know what? Pedestrians aren't either. I don't know that there's any actual evidence that anyone has ever been hit by an EV because they couldn't hear it. And a lot of cars now, gas engines included, are quiet. You go to a parking lot, you can barely hear them now. They're getting very good. It's one of the progress they've made in combustion vehicles is making them quieter. So.
I got a couple of things here. We've been talking a lot about nuclear power in the last few episodes, and usually we complain about it a lot. And of course, it's too expensive. It takes too long. It's too difficult. It's too dangerous. What do you do with the waste? All these kinds of things. And there's just a few nuclear projects in the works, but a lot of them aren't getting completed because it takes too long. So one of them finally got completed. So I thought that I should mention that. This is in South Korea. This is a report from Power Magazine that one of these nuclear reactors has finally come online in South Korea, and it's 1,400 megawatts, which is quite sizable. And they've been working on it for about 10 years. Yeah, 1,400 megawatts. And so they may eventually have
what a normal nuclear reactor might be, because there'd be 1 gigawatt, I think.
Yeah, it's bigger than some of the other reactors that we've been talking about lately, the small modular ones.
That's for sure.
So there's still other reactors planned. So yeah, it took them about 10 years to get this one online. It was behind schedule. It did take longer than expected and probably cost more than expected. But they're continuing, and they're still working on other units. So they could eventually have 4 of these units in place, and they're meant to last about 60 years. They're designed to last 60 years. So
my prediction, Brian, if I may interject,
yep,
they won't last 60 years. They'll shut them down because they won't be cost competitive 20 years from now.
That's probably the case, is that wind, solar, and batteries will displace them, and it'll be cheaper to build that.
Cheaper to just say shut it down. Of course, it's not easy to shut down a nuclear reactor. You've got to get rid of it. You got to bury it. And you got to, it's not easy. It's okay. Good for them. Good for them.
So a story here from Electrek. The U.S. Army is getting into floating solar. So they have launched the largest floating solar farm in the southeast of the United States. This is only 2 megawatts, it's a 1.1 megawatt farm with 2 megawatt hours of battery storage as well. But I just thought it was interesting because this is the U.S. Army. The U.S. Army is obviously has a huge budget. They're one of the largest polluters in the U.S. It's, when you have a government, it's essentially a government department of some kind that with a budget of probably trillions of dollars, they're going to burn a lot of fossil fuels. Yeah. But we've covered other stories like this as well, where the U.S. Army has figured out that they've crunched the numbers, and it makes sense to go solar, it makes sense to go electric for a bunch of their vehicles. And it makes sense from a defense perspective. Like energy security is energy independence. So if the U.S. can be energy independent, that's good for the Army, because that's good for the overall security of the United States. So, I just thought that was interesting. The U.S. Army is continuing along their path of going green.
And in an Armageddon scenario, and there's no energy around, hopefully the sun will still be shining. So... Brian, let's dip into the mailbag, and just ahead, the lightning round, where we skim through the rest of the week's headlines really quickly. But first, from Dawn in Toronto, Ontario, known to foreigners as Toronto, says, "Gentlemen, don't know if you guys caught this radio interview on CBC with environmentalist David Suzuki. Nothing surprising here from the original science over stupidity, apoplectic." Yeah, he knew I wouldn't be able to pronounce a word with so many vowels like that and consonants. But I've got a recording here of it from the dictionary.
Apoplectic.
So I was just going to insert that and hope no one noticed.
Nice.
Voice of reason, he says. But Saskatchewan is mentioned several times. That's where we live. And they discuss their electric car trip from BC to Ontario. So David Suzuki, I guess, is kind of the David Attenborough of Canada. He's been a presenter on when we only had one channel of television on the nature of things. He is beloved by many people, hated by those who think that EVs kill dogs. Same group of people. I watched him speak in person once. He's, it's hard. I don't know how anybody could dislike the guy. Anyway, he is a scientist by trade, and he's. I remember seeing a TV story with him buying a Prius in 1999. I thought, oh my God, that lucky bastard. I would just love to have one of those. That's so cool to think that the world is advancing like that. Well, now he's got a 150-kilometer electric car, kind of like mine, probably a first generation or second generation Leaf, maybe from 2014 or something like that. But he was making this trip from BC to Ontario over 8 days in an electric car, and I think it was a Volvo, and someone was driving him because he's getting quite old now, and they're making a documentary. But they were on the radio talking about this, and he was kind of asked, like, are there any problems? So, Don, I've pulled a clip from that show to see, so we can listen to it.
But we drove by electric car the entire way.
And we didn't know if we were going to hit a lot of barriers. We just thought we'd test it out and see. And we made it, and it was quite comfortable. But we did hit a few problems along the way.
Oh, yeah? Where?
Well, first of all, you've got to be mapping your way through the various different charge stations.
For fast chargers.
Once in a while, there'd be one that was closed, and that would kind of put a little spanner in the mix. But
yeah, but if you're a techno nerd like me, it's still not simple. Like, you got to punch in, you got to get an app here, and you got to download blah blah blah. And I would have given up. So it's got to be much easier. It seems to me.
Yeah, I agree there, and I think we're learning that every day, that it has to be easier.
Well, and even as we were just talking about, like, the Tesla is the easiest because you just plug in and the car takes care of everything. But just walking back to my hotel here, there's a gas station right here.
Oh my God.
And I was just thinking to myself, I'm so glad I don't have to visit this gas station.
You have no idea.
First of all,
I've got a story about that gas station. I was pulling a trailer, and I got stuck, and people had to get out and direct traffic at a very busy intersection to get me out of there. That's how bad it was. And I was only looking for propane. They didn't have any. You can't buy propane in Banff. You have to go to Canmore.
Well, it is, I think, the only gas station in Banff, and it tends to be, a little bit crowded. And I was just so glad that, it's like we're used to gassing up from gas stations. So most people don't think of it as an inconvenience. But once you've had the absolute convenience of just plugging in your charger, not having to speak to an attendant, not having to put a credit card in a thing, not having to punch any numbers, I was so glad that I didn't have to visit that station, as I have had in the past.
Well, I'm traumatized just thinking about that. I used to visit Banff every year as a kid because we had a great aunt that lived there, and she lived her house, I remember, backed onto the mountain slope, and she had bears every morning in her garbage. I remember that. And she had a guest house where the garage was. And I also remember being slammed in the face by a doorknob that my brother did. I had bloody nose. That's my memory. Anyway, I got sick of it. I got sick of Banff because we were there every year because we could. Anyway, it's a beautiful place, and you should go there if you haven't. Don also goes on to say, why is Chevy lowering the price of your future electric car, James? At least in the U.S., they can't even build them properly yet, and everyone is raising their prices on other cars. So, other than Tesla. Well, Tesla's raising their prices too. And are they selling below cost? Don, I don't know. And I don't think you're correct in saying they can't build them properly yet. I think that they don't want to go through another multi-billion-dollar battery recall and replace the battery units on these cars again. I would assume this is going to be, they've got it figured out. If they don't, then GM's in big trouble.
Yeah. What we're not sure is we don't know if they've figured out the cost yet, that if they're making a profit on these or selling them at a loss. But I mean, I guess they're lowering the prices because they need to sell more.
They're going to come out with an Equinox, which is a legitimate high-selling small SUV for under $30,000 US, all EV next year with a decent range. They're not going to be selling millions of these things and losing money. I can't see. There must be a way. I think the scale volume is what's going to do it for them. That's going to be a big issue.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round.
Brian, 10,000 Toyota drivers signed a petition urging company to commit to EVs. Isn't that funny? I would have signed that petition. Put our future before your profits, you horrible company. Coming out with one EV that nobody likes and nobody wants to drive. They don't hate it. It's just not loved much. It's amazing how, the latest EV everybody wants. I kind of wanted an Ioniq 6 or an Ioniq 5 or an EV6. Driving your Tesla, I want a Tesla again. I'm right back at the Tesla again,
No, and there's all kinds of brand loyalty for Toyota because of their history with the Prius that we've been talking about that goes back over 20 years. So, people, I think, were really betting on Toyota to be the green car brand, and it just has not panned out.
Hyundai has leased only 29 hydrogen-powered vehicles in 6 years in Canada. 29.
Well, how many hydrogen filling stations are there?
0.29. I don't know. There's probably one per 4 cars. I'll say that. There's not a lot, but that's incredible.
They've sold a few more in California because there's an area of California where there is a handful of hydrogen fueling stations. But I think, in Canada, there's maybe a couple on the West Coast or something. I'm not sure. Those 6 people that have leased it obviously figured out a way to fuel them.
So, Brian, there are now 38 pure electric car models on offer in the United States. 38 different models. That's right now. That's not a year from now. It's not 2 years from now. Right now, there's 38 to choose from. So we're getting there. When we started this show, there was probably 18 or 20.
No, that's true. I will say that they're probably not mostly available, that there's waiting lists and it would take a while to get one. But no, that's something.
Well, my Toyota lot is still empty here. So a lot of cars are not. I see Hyundai has more cars and Kia has more cars, but Toyota certainly doesn't. The Biden administration wants electric vehicle charging stations every 50 miles or 80 kilometers along interstate highways. Good idea. There's another thing,
That's a great idea.
I wanted to talk a little bit about a piece that, because my son and I got into a discussion, and he was saying that all my engineering bros are investing and making lots of money off of gas, off of the oil industry. So they're all investing in it. But there was a piece in the New York Times that said that, and he even showed me a YouTube video before that as to why this is. Do you know why gas prices are so high? It's because oil companies are trying to make as much profit as they can. So they're not reinvesting in new exploration because a well today might not be profitable in 10 years because they know the EV revolution is coming. This is what the oil people are saying. So they're paying out dividends back to their investors, which is good if you've got oil stocks. But in a way, it's going to kill the EV industry or the gas industry even more, oil and gas, because it's going to speed up the revolution without as much oil expansion as we might have seen in other times if they didn't know that the end was coming. So yes, high gas prices would have meant a lot more oil development. We're seeing a lot less of it now. And as a result,
divesting from oil investments is a great idea because it's good for the planet, but it is entirely possible that it will remain a good investment because, as you say, they're just going to milk the current infrastructure for as much as they possibly can while investing as little as possible because, they can see that the end is near.
In the Make James Angry segment this week, Brian, a new bill has been introduced to North Carolina to try and eliminate free charging for electric cars at businesses. We can't have that. We can't have the national park giving you free electricity. No, we have to stop that because EVs kill dogs, don't you see? Jesus, I can't get over that. I think that's going to be the title of our episode, EVs Kill Dogs.
Yeah.
It's going to stay with me all week when I sleep. I'm sorry. That's mad. If the bill goes through, Brian, if the bill goes through, some charging stations that are not compliant will be charged $50,000. But they'll also be offered up to $50,000 to take them down of government money to take down a free charger at a business. This is insanity.
Well, let's hope that this doesn't pass. It seems too crazy to pass. So hopefully It doesn't.
The legislature's logic for this, the guy who came up with this, he says it's not fair to people who don't drive electric vehicles since there's no free gasoline anywhere.
Yeah, so he's referring mostly to a business that has free electric chargers.
Hotels, shopping malls. Come here, we have free electricity. We're supporting the environment. The adoption of EVs. We're good people.
So he's saying that's not fair because if you visit this store in a gas vehicle, you're not getting anything free, and technically you're paying for the other people's electricity because it goes into the, the operating cost of the business. But, if anybody crunched the numbers, the cost of electricity is going to be, maybe $20 a day for the business. It is absolutely makes very little difference on the bottom line.
A Bloomberg Intelligence report out this week says that Tesla may remain the top EV maker in the world for another 18 months, but might be supplanted by VW or Ford or somebody like that. I don't know how you feel about that, but they say that the scale of production, which is finally starting to ramp up, and battery costs coming down are the barriers. But right now, those things are improving, and they will seriously challenge Tesla. As new generation models truly designed for volume arrive in 2025 and 2026 with proprietary software, all this might change. We'll see. So LFP chemistries keep prices down, as well as cell-to-pack battery configurations. Yeah, well, I mean, that's what we want. We want everybody to challenge Tesla. We want lots of EVs. We don't want just Teslas. We want everybody making as many as they can.
Yeah, and Volkswagen has the most ambitious plans, so I guess it's possible that, 18 months seems way too soon for Volkswagen to overtake Tesla in terms of volume. I'm thinking it's going to be another, at least a couple of years later than that, if ever, because Tesla's scaling up as fast as they can as well.
All right, that's our time for this week. My battery is running low on my laptop, too, so it's another battery issue. The world runs on batteries. We're back next week with a new show. Brian, you're back in town, right?
Yes, I will be in my normal bomb shelter studio next week.
Contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com and on Twitter and TikTok, Clean Energy Pod. See you next week, everyone.
See you next week.